Hi guys, my name is Wale Raji from EdenFamily, the ministry dedicated to supporting couples to enjoy their marriage. Today we want to talk about communication in marriage, and we will be defining what communication is. We will talk about some of the problem and possible solution. Communication has been described as the process of transferring information from one person to the other. Did you know that communication is the most important factor in a relationship? This is because it affects every other area of your relationship. It affects the sex, it affects the way you handle money, it affects the way you parent, and it affects your overall intimacy. Some of the problems we can find in communication within the marriage context are priority. For a lot of us, we just don't prioritize communication. Study shows that most couples spend 2.4 hours together every day, and 55 minutes of that time they spend on TV, and just 35 minutes is spent by average couple together. So a lot of us are not actually communicating. Yet in Genesis 2 verse 18, the scripture says, God says, it is not good for man to be alone. I will make him a helpmeet. Another translation suggests that God wanted to give Adam a companion, somebody he can relate with, because he was on his own and he could not relate with the animals. So God created something that was compatible to him intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually by creating the woman, so that they can relate and talk together and commune together. In essence, marriage was built and meant for communication and communion and fellowship, but a lot of us are spending less and less time communicating together. Hence, some of the problems we're experiencing in marriage. So, priority is one of the main factors in communication in marriage. The other problem we have in communication in marriage is what I call perception. By perception, I mean how you view or see things. So some of us, we see things differently from our partner because we all have different background, different history, and different experience. Yet, how you see things can determine how you relate with your partner. A school of thought in psychology says that men are not offended by things, but by how they view things. So essentially, it is not things that offend you, but the way you interpret the thing. For instance, if we're standing at the bus stop and I push you suddenly, you're likely to be offended and almost want to fight me. But if you realize that by pushing you, I'm helping you to avoid a car hitting you or somebody punching you, you will thank me for pushing you, for saving you from harm. So the same issue of pushing, but you're seeing it differently. So a lot of us, we need to change the way we see our partner to help us improve the way we communicate. For instance, most of us view our partner based on our history. If men have been rude and crude and abusive towards you, you can begin to see your partner based on your past experience. You say all men are dogs. So you expect your current husband or partner to be a dog, to cheat on you, almost looking for evidence to suit your own state of mind. Or if a woman has been materialistic, or in your life they've financially abused you, you can begin to view all women as gold diggers and materialistic. Hence, you begin to see your partner as all women are materialistic. So, but it's important for us to give each other the benefit of doubt. In a nutshell, people should be treated as innocent until proven otherwise. So in a marriage, we have to come to the relationship on a plain slate. So we don't expect that we treat them like we've been treated in the past. So our perception is important. The Bible puts it this way in Titus 1. It says, to the pure, all things are pure, but to the defiled, nothing is clean. A lot of us see our partner based on our history and our experience. But we have to learn to change our perception and give our partner the benefit of doubt until they prove otherwise. The third problem I find in communication is the fear of consequences, or fear that the partner will use the information you give them against you, maybe when you're having a fight or argument. So if you decide to be vulnerable, for instance, you say to him, oh, when I was younger, I committed abortion, for instance. You might worry that your partner will use that information against you to abuse you in the future. So fear of consequences of the information being used can be a reason why we refuse to communicate. But it's important for us to create an environment where we don't use information against each other, and we don't let it be like when we are sharing information, people have to be punished for sharing. People need to be free to express themselves within boundaries, of course. Fear of punishment should not exist in a marriage. Everybody needs to be free to express themselves, obviously within boundary. As the scripture puts it, perfect love casts out fear. In a perfect loving relationship, there is no fear of judgment or punishment. The number fourth reason why communication can be difficult in a marriage is what I call the non-verbal cues. Study shows that over 70% of communication is non-verbal. They are beyond the words we speak. Things like your tone of voice, your body language, the space you give to the person you're communicating, they matter and they communicate much more than the words we speak. For instance, if you're trying to communicate help and support to somebody, yet your voice is raised and the person feels your raised voice is communicating aggression and agitation, they are not likely to receive your message of support. Because so it's important for us to reduce, if you type that raise your voice, reduce your voice to the level that the person can know that you're communicating the appropriate message. And we also need to check our body language such that you're not communicating aggression through your body language. For instance, pointing at people while you are trying to talk to them, it just speaks of aggression and intimidation. Or if you're invading their space while you're communicating to them, it can also suggest aggression. So non-verbal cues, we need to just be mindful of it and check it that the message we are trying to communicate is not contrary to the non-verbal cues we are depicting. So the number fifth problem we see in communication is what I call poor communication skill. Now we've discovered that communication is an act that we need to learn. So a lot of us have learned the wrong communication skills, so hence we have problem when we communicate with each other. One of the example of a poor communication skill is when you listen to respond rather than listening to understand. So some people, when you're talking to them, they're just listening, waiting for you to shut up so they can dish out their advice or their response. They're not really listening to empathize or to understand you, but they're listening, just waiting for you to stop so they can respond. This is an example of a poor communication skill, because listening should be about understanding and less about responding. The other example of a poor communication skill is people who outrightly interrupt you. So rather than just wait for you to finish before they respond, some people just cut you short and they don't even let you finish and they just interrupt. There are people who have a tendency to interrupt. So if you find yourself always interrupting, try to avoid this mistake, because somebody who wants to communicate with you and feel you are constantly interrupting them, they're likely to be discouraged in communicating with you. Another example of a poor communication skill is giving unsolicited advice. Sometimes our spouse may want to just unburden, just to share their burden with us. They're not asking us to give them advice or tell them what to do, but we jump in with our advice. Men are particularly guilty of this, and women too. We jump in with our advice, and the problem with giving unsolicited advice is that it makes the person feel like they're incompetent to solve their problem. So, and you incapacitate them and they feel stupid. So when the next time your spouse is trying to share with you how their day was, or if they're feeling bad, just be mindful and don't jump in with your advice. Another example of poor communication skill is people who like to argue their point. They have a need to win the argument. Such people are actually not confident in who they are, and if they don't win, it's an extension of their person. They feel damaged if they don't win the argument. Such people, I would rather just avoid them outrightly. And then finally, the last example of a poor communication skill, it's when you're not able to ask appropriate questions. In psychology, we talk about open-ended questions and closed questions. Some open-ended questions actually elicit further conversation, but closed questions, they almost end the conversation. For instance, if somebody is having a chat with you and you jump in with a question, why? Why questions can make you feel like they're accusing you. So avoid starting a question with why. You can say things like, tell me about how your day was, tell me how you're feeling, but just maybe put the why in the middle, but avoid starting a question with why, and use open-ended questions that will elicit further conversation. Something like, can you tell me about how you're feeling regarding this issue? Then the person is likely to want to expatiate on how the situation is. So these are the examples of poor communication skill. Another problem of communication is what I call external factor. In this day of technology, much of our devices are taking over and they are almost encroaching in our intimacy. Things like phone, TV. I saw a family of husband and wife recently with the two children in their lounge, and the daddy was on the computer, mom was on their tablet, the children were on their phone. They were all in one enclosed space, but nobody was relating or communicating with each other. These things is encroaching on the communication level of family. So we have to be mindful that we are not allowing things like TV during dinner or phone during dinner to limit the way we communicate. External factor can also include friends, families, and extended families that don't allow couples to have time to talk. And then finally, one problem we have in communication is time. A lot of us don't give time to communicate. Believe it or not, for you to be able to effectively communicate as a couple, you have to intentionally, deliberately, and strategically set time to communicate. You can communicate before you go to work, talk about how your day, what your plans for the day, so nobody's surprised about anything. You can communicate during work, call each other and say, I just called you because I miss you. You can communicate after work by saying, how was your day? Or what I call a connection conversation. So you've had a stressful day already, and then you come home together, maybe over a glass of juice or non-alcoholic wine. You just sit down in the kitchen and talk about how your day was, and you be supportive to each other rather than just putting on the TV or on your phone. Or you can even have weekends during dinner, get the children to eat separately once a week, and you just have your quiet dinner together. Or better still, you go out and have dinner dates where you talk, not about yourself, not about the children or their school fees or any other thing. You just talk about yourself and rediscover yourself. So some of these are the problems we have in marriage. At this junction, we're now going to talk about possible solution to communication in marriage. The first solution I would like to suggest is to create a non-judgmental attitude. Some of us, even before the people start to come to communicate with us, we have a judgmental attitude. We just assume and we judge them based on our own perception. But it's important for us to create a non-judgmental attitude or environment so that our spouse and family can come to us freely and know that we will have an understanding heart when they talk to us about anything. Even if we disagree about their choices, we know that we accept them as a person. So we need to create a non-judgmental, non-biased attitude. The second solution is to learn to listen to understand. Like I enumerated earlier, some people listen just to respond, not necessarily to understand. But I've discovered that there's a difference between hearing and listening. If you hear me, you may just hear the noise I'm making. But if you understand, you comprehend and you understand where I'm coming from my conversation. So you are hearing and listening to me based on my own experience of what I'm telling you. So it's important for us to learn to listen to understand rather than listening to respond. And the other solution to communication is to listen actively. My wife used to tell me sometimes that even though you're hearing me, but you're not really listening to me. That's because sometimes I'm not actively listening. It's not enough for you to just say, I'm listening to you while I'm watching my Chelsea playing football. And I say, or you may say to her, it is ears we use in listening, not the eyes. I'm listening to you anyway. No, you need to listen with your whole body. You need to listen with your eyes, listen with your ears, and possibly listen with your heart. And also to use words that will show the person that you're actually listening to them. Example is to learn to paraphrase, learn to reflect back. So if they're telling you about how their day was, for example, maybe they say, oh, I missed my boss, my train was delayed, I got to work late, my boss was angry, I was giving the warning, it was a terrible day today. So you will paraphrase and reflect back. So you're telling me that your boss was late, you missed your train, and your boss was angry with you. By reflecting back to them, they know now that you are actually, you were listening to them. And you can also learn to help them to summarize the conversation. So it's important for us to learn to listen to understand and also to practice active listening. Not just listening with our ears, but with our eyes, with our hearts. The other solution to communication in marriage is to have what I call emotional connection. In a therapeutic environment, it's important to create that emotional connection between the therapist and the patient. If you do not have that connection, it's going to be difficult to have any conversation. And one of the ingredients of having this emotional connection between husband and wife is to have this initial acceptance. So both parties know that they're accepted. No matter what is going on, I love you as a person. I may not accept what you're doing. I may not approve of your choices, but you as an individual, you are accepted. The scripture puts it this way, that we are accepted in the beloved. For instance, I work in the mental health field, and I've got a client who uses drugs and prostitutes. And now I don't really necessarily accept her behavior, but her as a person, I accept her as a person. I don't accept her drug use or prostitution, but anytime she comes to me for help, I will support her because I accept her as a person, not necessarily accept. So when we project to our spouse that no matter what you say or what you're going through, I accept you as who you are, not necessarily what you do, they're likely to be able to communicate with us freely. The other ingredient in generating this emotional connection is to learn to empathize. Empathy is very crucial in marriage, and it simply means feeling with people or putting yourself in their shoe, not in your shoe. So you listen to them and you understand based on where they're coming from, not where you're coming from. So if my friend says to me, oh, I'm going to divorce my wife, she's giving me stress, I'm not going to jump in and judge him because I necessarily have a good marriage and I'm against divorce. I'm going to try to understand where he's coming from. So we need to learn to empathize when we are listening and communicating with people by understanding them based on where they're coming from. The last factor in eliciting this emotional connection is to be congruent. By that I mean to be genuine. Be yourself. Don't have a mask on the face. Don't have a facade. Be yourself. Don't pretend. So for the wife, don't pretend you have a good day if you had a bad day. And the husband, don't just pretend you're macho if your boss has humiliated you. Just learn to be yourself with your spouse. So when we're ourselves, when we accept each other, and when we empathize with each other, we're likely to have this emotional connection. And suddenly you will say, oh, you get me. You understand me. It's not like you have said much, but the fact that you accept them, the fact that you empathize with them, the fact that you're yourself, you're not pretending, they just feel you get them. So this will help in enhancing communication. The number 5th factor in helping to improve communication is what I call assertiveness. By assertiveness, I mean the ability to be confident, to express yourself, whilst respecting yourself and the other person. So you're able to express yourself while you're respecting yourself and the other person. So you're not telling the truth harshly. The Bible says we should speak the truth in love. Some people speak the truth, but it does more harm than good. They call it bitter truth. The truth in their mouth is more bitter than it's sweet. So it's important when we are communicating with each other to be assertive, not necessarily aggressive. Aggressive is when you just speak the truth. It doesn't matter how the other person feels. If they feel bad, you don't care. You just dish out your truth. The other extreme is to be passive. So some people in a relationship, sometimes it's usually the women. They're more passive. They don't say how they feel. They don't tell their husband when they are not happy. They just continue to bottle it until one day they will explode. Because you see, emotions can never really be successfully repressed. It will be expressed in other ways. If it doesn't find expression in your mouth, it will be expressed in your behavior. If you don't tell your spouse how you're feeling, you're likely going to act it out. And the problem with this type of communication is that he may get the wrong message. So maybe you're giving him a cold shoulder rather than telling him how you feel. And then he might begin to imagine things and say, is she with someone else? What is happening? So you see now you have two problems. Problem of communication, and then you're suspecting of each other. So it's important for us to learn to communicate how we feel in an assertive, non-aggressive, or passive way. One way of doing this is what Dr. John Gottman in his book called the XY method, XYZ method. So remember XYZ. X is tell them what they've done. Y is tell them how you feel. And Z is tell them what you would like them to do in the future. For example, recently I went to a barbecue party with my wife. Let's just give an example. Maybe throughout the party she just ignored me and was just talking to her friends. And then when we come back, rather than me screaming and shouting in an aggressive way and threatening her, I would say, I need to speak to you. Oh, when we were at that barbecue party, you just ignored me. All you were doing is talking to your friends throughout. You didn't even come and sit with me at all. I felt really demeaned. I felt unappreciated. And I felt lonely. So in the future, when we go out, can you please come and spend some time with me? I will appreciate it. And then she will likely say, I'm sorry, it won't happen again. But if you go for the juggernaut and start to attack her, I will not take this from you, this is rubbish. If you attack her, next time you try it, I will show you pepper. You are now attacking her. What do people do when they get attacked? They defend. Then she will defend herself, say, I didn't do anything. Now you have another problem. Not just communication of argument and now another. So we need to learn to express ourselves in an assertive way of using the XY method. X, tell them what they've done. Y, how you feel about what they've done. And Z, what you would like them to do better next time. So the other thing we need to learn in improving communication is, like I said, is to learn to prioritize it. Communication is the most intimate thing couple can do. More than sex, more than praying, communication is the most intimate. God created Eve for Adam as a companion, someone to relate with, because he could not relate with the animals. We have to go back to the basics and learn to communicate and fellowship with each other. We have to prioritize communication. Like I said, study shows that average couple spend about 2 hours together. 55 minutes of that time is on watching TV. Only 35 minutes is used in talking together per day. We need to improve this by prioritizing communication. If communication breaks down in a relationship, it affects every area of the relationship, because you begin to suspect, you don't know what the other person is doing. And then finally, we have to intentionally create time for communication. Communication will not just happen unconsciously. We have to be deliberate and strategic. Create time, like I suggest before. Communicate before work, before you go into work. Talk about what you're planning to do. So nobody's going to be surprised. Nobody's going to say, oh, I saw your husband or your wife there. No, you know where each other you're going. Communicate during work. Call each other, just to show that you care. We can communicate during work, after work, and even before work. Set time during dinner to talk, not over TV or phone. Put the phone off, TV off, and just discover each other again. Go out for dinners and talk, not about the children and their school fees. Talk about each other and your dreams and your fears. I want to thank you for listening to this message on communication. You can leave your comments, suggestions, and questions at our usual address on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, eden-family.org.uk. And I pray that you and your family will experience peace and prosperity.